What happens when the planet of shock and disruption enters the sign of intellect, information, and communication? We're about to find out because Uranus is entering the sign of Gemini. And this 8-year transit is bringing a tidal wave of revelation, innovation, and yes, a healthy dose of chaos. This transit sparks the beginning of an information revolution, bringing disruption and change into a brand new area of all of our lives. Over the next 8 years, we'll witness radical changes in the ways that we learn, think, speak, communicate, and connect with the world at large. We're talking disruptive technologies, paradigm-shifting ideas, and massive breakthroughs in things like communication technology, education, transportation, and even commerce that completely reshape what we've come to accept as normal. Historically speaking, Uranus and Gemini has coincided with moments of revolution, massive upheaval, and even war, especially for the United States. It's also been connected to some of the most groundbreaking advancements in communication and computing in modern history, something we'll touch on a little bit later in this video. And Uranus won't just be shaking things up on a global level, it's personal too. Expect paradigm-busting downloads, restless energy, and a deep, sometimes very uncomfortable push to break free from the status quo in a brand new area of our lives, in a brand new way that we have never connected with before, that we've never tried before. Things are about to get weird for all of us. And this is especially a very important time for all of us to break free from old patterns of thinking that have left us feeling stuck and complacent for far too long. This is a time of intellectual awakening, rebellion against the algorithm, and liberating your voice and ideas in totally new ways. However, it's also a time of potential burnout, nervous system overload, and confronting the shadow side of our hyper-connected world. In today's video, we're going to dive deep into the major themes of Uranus and Taurus that are going to be impacting all of us over the next 8 years, including a forecast for all 12 signs. And before we dive into it, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss an important astrology update. I try to do a new forecast or tutorial video every single Saturday at 9 a.m. Mountain Time, so you definitely don't want to miss that, especially if you're interested in keeping up with the latest transits and astrological influences. Also, make sure that you comment below, let me know how this transit is impacting you personally, and share this with a friend if you feel like they can benefit from the information that I'm sharing with you today. Also, don't forget to download your free Astrology 101 quick reference guide at the link down in the description below. This is how you're going to learn how to navigate your own birth chart to understand yourself better, but also to understand even more deeply in a more complicated and nuanced way how this Uranus and Gemini transit will be impacting you personally. It's 100% free down in the description below. So I'm going to start first by covering a more general overview of what Uranus and Gemini means. Then we'll move into the historical context and how this is going to be impacting people on a personal level, including the major activations and transits that are happening while Uranus is in Gemini throughout that entire 8-year period. So this is going to be a deep dive, you guys. So grab a cup of tea, settle in, get a notebook for taking notes, grab your journal, whatever it is that you need, and let's get started. So Uranus is a modern invisible planet, meaning that we can't see it with the naked eye, and it was discovered in modern times. It's not one of the traditional planets which end at Saturn, and it is a planet that has come to be associated with massive disruptions, a shock and awe energy. When Uranus is in the mix, things get super, super weird. Uranus is also connected to new technology, and it's associated with the Industrial Revolution, which was happening around the time of its discovery. Uranus is all about shaking things up and busting old paradigms, busting our old ways of believing, thinking, existing as a society at large. It is a transpersonal planet, which means that it's considered to have a big influence on generations and on world events, on things at large. But it also has a very personal influence, where Uranus transits through your chart is always an area of 8 years of shakeups and changes and pivots, sometimes big disruptions and sometimes minor ones, usually a combination of the two. But regardless of how this impacts you personally, the thing that we can be certain of is that at the beginning of a Uranus transit, things are going to look very, very different than the way that they're going to look at the end. And these massive upheavals and changes are going to come in bursts that will come during these major activation periods. Uranus is the great disruptor and the great awakener. It brings downloads, inspiration, moments of genius, epiphanies, and it represents all things that are outside of the box, ahead of their time, and that go against the status quo. It is a rebellious energy. It is a revolutionary energy that will impact us, not just as a collective, but on a personal, individual level as well, as we rebel against the old status quo in each of our lives in completely different ways, which of course we'll cover when we get into that forecast for all 12 signs. Prior to July 7th of 2025, which is when Uranus moves into Gemini, Uranus was transiting the sign of Taurus. Taurus is the most stable, it's the most grounded, it's the earthiest of the earth signs. It likes its comfort zones. It likes to maintain the status quo, especially on a very physical, tangible, and material level. That is not what it's going to be like with Uranus in the sign of Gemini. We're actually going to be welcoming the changes, welcoming the shifts in our paradigm, welcoming the new information, the new insights, the new downloads that are coming through during this time, because Gemini is a mutable air sign. Gemini likes change. It likes to shake things up. It likes to do things in new and innovative ways. It's curious about all these different topics and ideas. It's more open-minded than that Taurus energy. And so Uranus in Gemini is going to break us free from a mental rut collectively that we've been going through, but also on an individual level. Gemini is the sign of your nervous system, your brain, and so some of us, especially if we have a lot of planets in Gemini, might start to feel a little bit more frazzled. And so doing different practices and techniques to calm your nervous system is going to be key for those people. The other thing that I would recommend doing is, if you don't already have one, get a journal and start just writing down things on a day-to-day basis, because you're going to have flashes of insight and inspiration in a brand new area of your life. That's part of this Uranus and Gemini energy. Gemini is also about communication and connectivity. It's about the way that we socialize and interact with other people. And with Uranus moving into the sign of Gemini, collectively we can expect that the way that we connect and the way that we obtain information, the way that we share information, that is going to change, and it is going to become even more technological than it already is. Although there will be people that'll be breaking out of that paradigm, rebelling against the status quo. I can only imagine the state of AI after we get through this Uranus and Gemini transit in 2023, especially because Pluto is also in Aquarius, and that is the AI transit. And so right now in 2025, as I'm recording this, AI is already doing really crazy things, especially with writing, especially with influencing our thought processes, doing a lot of our thinking for us if you're using it in a way that is maybe not the best for your brain. And it's going to only get crazier from here. There are things that AI will be doing that we can't even fathom yet. We can't even begin to comprehend. Also, with technologies that are associated with communication, that's going to be a big thing that's going to be in flux, and we're going to have some very shocking, dramatic changes to that. Previously, we've had a lot of breakthroughs involving computer technology, but also communication technology, especially with the invention of the telegraph and the greater use of the telegraph back in the day. We'll talk about that when we get into the historical context in just a minute. And in our day-to-day lives, the collective change in communication technology and the way that our paradigm around connection and communication is shifting, that is going to impact us each individually in a different way. And so we're going to see what's happening in the collective being reflected in our personal individual lives as a result of that. Uranus in Taurus was a time of cryptocurrency and a lot of major fluctuations in the crypto markets. I talked about that before even 2018 because that was just an obvious one. This is going to be Uranus in Gemini, a big fluctuation, a lot of really breakthrough technologies involving communication, connection, commerce as well is going to change because Gemini does have to do with merchants and commerce because it is ruled by Mercury and Mercury rules those things. The other thing that Mercury represents is our day-to-day information gathering processes through the media, through social media, through all of this tech that we're using today, and even through things like books, magazines, newspapers. And it really does rule not just the mainstream media, but especially social media. And I really think that information is going to become even more decentralized at this time. So those big media companies that kind of rule over everything, and a lot of the mainstream sources that we gather information from today, those are going to be broken apart. Those are going to be shaken up. Those are going to change very dramatically. Also, I think a lot of those things are going to be replaced by technology that generates the news and generates insight for us, which could be kind of not so good. I also see social media changing very dramatically over these next 8 years, where these social media platforms that we're using today will probably not be the same, and we probably won't even be using them because we're going to be onto something completely different that's probably integrated with AI. It's probably something that we can't even fathom yet, where we're connecting in very new and exciting and different ways. But again, there's always going to be a dark side or a shadow side to that. Looking at Uranus and Gemini, this is going to break us free from stuck patterns in communication. And I do think that this AI revolution that we're kind of going through right now, that's changing everything, that's going to show up in ways that are disruptive in a bad way as well. And there's going to be disruptions to that progress as a result. I think that more and more people are going to be using AI for their day-to-day communication instead of thinking for themselves. And I do think that's going to impact the way that we communicate in real life to people because we're going to lose some skills and maybe gain some others. And so it's interesting at the onset of this to really think about what's going to occur. But with Uranus, it's never what you expect it to be, and it never plays out the way you expect it to play out. And so all I know right now is what we think is going to be happening with communication, with AI, with all of this new tech over the next 8 years is nothing like what it's actually going to be like in real life, what we're actually going to accomplish during this time. And so think about back in like 2018 when we started Uranus and Taurus, and there was a little bit of a crypto thing, like people were talking mostly about like Bitcoin and Ethereum and some of these other coins, and then all of a sudden we're at the end of Uranus and Taurus and there's like altcoins and meme coins and all these other crazy things that I don't really understand. Like, it's gotten wild out there. It's going to be similar for Uranus and Gemini. It's going to become very decentralized. There's going to be a lot of like decentralized AI and just things that we can't even imagine yet because they're just so weird, right? Like, whoever thought that we'd have meme coins? That's weird, right? So like the weirdest thing you can think of with this Uranus and Gemini and communication technology, social media, AI, all of that, that's probably what we're going to anticipate having by the end of this. And Gemini isn't just about connection and communication. It also rules over transit, especially day-to-day travel and vehicles. And what do we have on the onset of Uranus and Gemini becoming a much bigger deal? Electric vehicles. Just a few years ago, there weren't that many electric vehicles on the road. Now today in 2025, I can't even walk down the street in my small town without hearing that annoying, like, screechy sound that the electric vehicles all make. I don't know how you guys drive around in those, by the way. Hopefully they'll fix that while Uranus is in Gemini. But the technology around electric vehicles, the adoption of electric vehicles, whether we like it or not, that's going to become a much bigger issue. And there's going to be new forms of transit, new technologies around transit, again, that we can't even fathom yet. But Uranus is electricity, Gemini is vehicles. Obvious conclusion there that any astrologer could make: electric vehicles will become a bigger deal and a bigger issue, and there will be disruptive new technologies involving electric vehicles, electric transportation, that will come up over these next few years. And when it comes to information, Uranus is not just about media. It's not just about our day-to-day communications. It's also about education, especially like grade school and early education, learning more basic skills, certifications, and things like that. And technology is essentially going to, I think, break the education system during this time. It's already starting to, and we're just at the very beginning. And so the way school is approached for our children today in 2025 is not going to be the same as the way that it is dealt with in 2033 when we're done with this transit. There's going to be a big revolution. And there's also going to be a lot of decentralization and a lot of unschooling, homeschooling. That's going to become an even bigger thing than it already is as we go through this transition and people become dissatisfied with the way things are going, with the new integration of technology into our education systems. And yeah, I think that's going to be another really big thing. And kind of circling back to communication, because communication is just the Geminiest of the Gemini things. We do need to talk about the communication grid. Uranus in the sign of Gemini can represent shocking situations, disruptions that we do not expect and do not see coming. And I really think that this is going to bring disruptions to the communication systems, to the communication grid on and off throughout this time. Uranus is technology, Uranus is electricity even, so it could be that there's something to do with like the electrical systems or something like that that brings things down. There's definitely a greater likelihood of disruptive influences like cyber attacks and other unexpected things that come in and disrupt the communication systems that we utilize today. That could look like disruptions to the social media apps, disruptions to commerce and apps that we use for actually exchanging money. It could look like disruptions to the education system. It could look like disruptions to public transportation. It looks like disruptions all over the place, right? And so these are not just always positive disruptions or disruptions due to technology and technological advancements. This also can be technology that is creating disruptions in an intentional and malefic way, and also unexpected things that come in like, EMPs that disrupt the grid in some way and cause some shorts or cause some sort of issues in these communication systems. That's definitely part of this energy too. And finally, before we get into the historical context for Uranus in the sign of Gemini, I want to mention the fact that Gemini rules the nervous system. And so, as you know, I'm a medical astrologer. I teach medical astrology in my medical astrology mastery course. And one of the things that I am a little concerned with is potential for different technologies, different things like EMFs, disrupting our nervous systems even more so than they already are. There could also be disruptive technologies or new innovative technologies that work to help improve our nervous systems in some way, right? And to improve our brains. But there can also be a shadow side to that too, where we are probably going to see things like digital implants and things like that in people's brains. It's just going to get really, really weird. All right, so let's get into the historical context for Uranus transiting through the sign of Gemini. I'm going to be specifically focusing on the last 3 transits of Uranus through Gemini, mostly because they're the most recent and the most relevant to where we're at right now, and also because I can't cover all of them throughout the entire history of the world, so we're going to make this a little bit more concise. This is going to focus more heavily on the United States because the United States was born under Uranus in Gemini. That's right. The Declaration of Independence was signed in a Uranus and Gemini transit, and therefore the United States is having its Uranus return. There's definitely a precedent that's been set during the Uranus and Gemini transits for very disruptive energies involving the US and especially involving war that the US is connected to. And so I don't want to scare anyone with this segment. History doesn't repeat itself exactly every time, but as we're entering into Uranus and Gemini and moving out of Uranus and Taurus, we're already seeing the energy around escalations in war. There are other things going on astrologically that can connect to that too, but this is what we're going to be focusing on here today. And so we already know that the birth of the United States in 1776 happened under a Uranus in Gemini transit. And the exact Uranus return for the United States based on the Sibley chart, which is the most utilized chart by astrologers for the birth of the United States, is going to be happening on July 26th of 2027. In addition to this, Gemini occupies the 7th house in the United States Sibley chart, which means that the descendant of the United States, which is connected to relations with other countries and things like that, that is in Gemini as well. And so transiting Uranus will actually hit the descendant of the United States natal chart on July 11th of 2028. These are two key dates that I want you to remember. And before that even takes place, we have a Mars-Uranus conjunction happening in the sign of Gemini in the 7th house of the United States on the 4th of July next year in 2026. That is huge. That is a solar return energy that is going to be very disruptive, very explosive, very volatile. And so I think the next few years for the United States might be difficult, especially when it comes to foreign relations and especially when it comes to US involvement in war, because for the past many years, the United States has always been involved in some sort of conflict, and things are only escalating as I am recording this video right now. So in addition to the American Revolution occurring during a Uranus in Gemini transit that happened between 1774 and 1782, the previous Uranus in Gemini transit, which happened between 1941 and 1948, also coincided with the Holocaust and World War II and the United States involvement in World War II. But it wasn't all just war and bad stuff that was happening that was connected to Uranus and Gemini during that time. We also had our very first TV commercial occur in 1941, which we can probably all agree was not for the better, but it's not as bad as, World War II or involvement in war. So this was a very disruptive influence in the way that we received information and entertainment through television, telecommunication systems, because now marketing was involved. And so now all of a sudden we have commercial breaks. This was also the time of the first programmable electronic computer. And so it was the spark of a digital mental revolution. This is also when we saw the foundations of silicon-based computing technologies. And so everything that we're dealing with today with AI and all of this technology that's really advanced, it really began and became possible as a result of this Uranus and Gemini transit, this time period, the last time we had Uranus and Gemini. Prior to that, Uranus was in Gemini from 1858 till 1866. This was the time of the US Civil War. This is especially significant because we also had Neptune in Aries at the early degrees of Aries at the onset of the Civil War, and that's where we're at right now. Now, do I think we're going to enter into a boots on the ground civil war? No, I think we're already in an information war. I think we're already, as a country, very divided. I think that these things are going to be amplified, but I don't necessarily personally think that we're going to enter into a physical civil war. I do think that this is going to be a time of increased conflict between the US and other countries, and I do think that the divisiveness and the rhetoric around that is going to increase, and there's going to be technology that's going to be amplifying that even further. I won't get into my speculations about that any deeper than that. You can maybe guess at what I'm talking about there. But we did have, again, precedent for conflict. So we had the birth of the United States, and then the next cycle we had the Civil War, and then the next cycle we had World War II. This is the time where we had the first transatlantic telegraph cable, which made instant or near instant communication between people in different countries across the world possible for the very first time. This is huge because Gemini is connectivity, Uranus is technology. This is such a Uranus and Gemini thing, and this really changed the way that we connect with everyone, that we connect with the world at large, that we share information with other people. And so again, not all bad things, but disruptive things, right? We have a combination of really difficult energy and a combination of disruptions that were very positive or revolutionary or changed things, in a historical context to where they would never be the same again after that. That is what Uranus does. So let's get into some of the key dates for the Uranus and Gemini transit. So Uranus enters Gemini for the very first time on July 7th of 2025, and then it'll re-enter in retrograde the sign of Taurus on November 7th of 2025. And so it's only going to be in Gemini for this first dip for just a couple of months. This is going to give us a really important taste of the change that is to come. This is when a lot of the Uranus and Gemini themes will start becoming really apparent in the collective, but also in our personal lives. It's going to show us where we need to create those mental shifts, where our paradigms are going to be busted, where new ideas are going to change our reality in ways that we will never come back from. It's going to show us where we need disruption. It's going to show us where we need to do things in a completely new, innovative, and strange way, potentially, compared to the way that we're used to. After that, Uranus is going to come back into Gemini for good on April 26th of 2026, and it's going to stay there until August 3rd of 2032 when it first dips into the sign of Cancer. It's only going to stay in Cancer for a couple of months, and it will re-enter Gemini on December 13th of 2032, where it will stay until it finally moves forward into Cancer once and for all on May 22nd of 2023. And so that first period between July 7th of 2025 and April 26th of 2026, when Uranus is going back and forth between Gemini and Taurus, this is a very volatile time, where we're going to be shedding our old skin, and it's the last time to break out of old paradigms, old energies that are connected to that Taurus area of our lives and our charts. And so we're going to see a lot of breakdowns and also breakthroughs during this time as we move out of one phase and enter into another, and we'll see that collectively as well. And during the Uranus and Gemini transit, Uranus will be making some very important long-term outer planet transits that will impact the way that that energy manifests. And at the beginning, this is actually very positive because Uranus will be forming what a lot of astrologers refer to as a minor triangle, which is essentially two sextiles and a trine. It's like a little triangle, not the same as a grand trine, where the sextiles are supportive, the trine is amazing, but it's not quite as benefic and harmonious as a grand trine would be. Either way, this is huge. Uranus will be in an actual trine with Pluto in the sign of Aquarius for the first few years. This influence will be strongest really through 2028, but especially in 2026 and in 2027. This is where we're going to see the biggest influence of that AI technological communication revolution. I think we're going to see technology really escalate like exponentially during this very short period of time, where there are things that we think that are only 10 years away that by 2028 we are going to have at our fingertips. And on an individual level, this is a huge catalyst for transformation and change that we need in our lives, and it happens in a way that's harmonious and very welcomed. This is where we get to create the change and also benefit from the change that's happening in our lives in order to align ourselves with what we truly need, want, and desire at a deep core level. This is where we're going to break out from anything that is inhibiting our freedom. This is a very liberating and empowering transit. And this is where things are going to be one way and then they're going to be completely a different way, because Pluto works in extremes. We can have extreme changes and extreme reversals of fortune in a very positive way, especially in the area of life where Pluto is transiting in the sign of Aquarius, but really in both because they're going to be connected. So we'll talk about that in the forecast for all 12 signs. The other thing that we have going on is Neptune is in Aries, and Uranus is actually going to be sextiling both Saturn and Neptune in the sign of Aries during its transit through the sign of Gemini, really mostly for the beginning period. It'll transit Neptune in that sextile for a little bit longer because Neptune moves much, much more slowly than Saturn does. But really, this is going to start this year. This is already a thing with the sextile at the very onset and the trine. But this is going to be most prevalent in 2025 and 2026, especially for Saturn. The Neptune influence will go until roughly 2028. This is an enhancement of this energy. It's where we get to actually take what we need in terms of this. We're really going to feel like we want to break out of something. We're really going to feel like uncomfortable with something in our lives where it's like there's an agitation that creates this need to instigate some sort of change. And that is the way Uranus transits go in general. But with this one, we're going to be able to intuit what it is that we need to create. So using our imaginations, our intuition to navigate the change. And also that Saturn does provide a certain level of stability, although it's not the most stable. I will say that out of what's going on here, Saturn and Neptune, Saturn being at its fall in the sign of Aries, and with Neptune, which is very watery and it dissolves kind of the structures of Saturn, that's going to be less stabilizing than it normally would be in sextile with Uranus. What this is really more about on that Saturn spectrum, on that Saturn end, is destabilizing and dissolving old structures, old boundaries, old rules, regulations, old things that we have adhered to for far too long, so we can create new systems and new structures individually and collectively. Really, overall, this pattern marks a period of accelerated change involving technology, communications, belief systems, and societal structures. And this is going to be reflected in the way that it influences our chart too. So the way that those outside things are influencing us personally will be reflected in the transits and the way that they impact our birth chart. And so this is going to be, again, really heavily implicated from 2025 to 2028. At the end of this transit, we have a grand finale of Uranus and Gemini with a Uranus-Saturn conjunction, which doesn't happen very often. The last time it happened was when I was born. So any of you who were born in the late 80s probably have this like Saturn conjunction to Uranus in Sagittarius in your birth chart. Well, in 2032, we're going to be having our midlife crisis transits with Saturn and Uranus in opposition to our natal Saturns and Uranus. And that's going to be quite interesting because it's unusual, to say the least. And this time around, this is happening in the sign of Gemini. This is a major breakdown in our old systems of communication, technology, all of those things we talked about at the start of this video. But this is also about creating new rules, regulations, structures, and systems because things are going to look so different at the end of this transit. Saturn's going to come in and it's going to be like, whoa. Technology has gotten wild. This is like the Wild West. This is chaos. We need to actually refine this and define what we're going to do with this moving forward. This is also going to look like kind of paring away the excess of technologies that we don't need. So Saturn's going to pose limitations and restrictions, not just externally through regulations and rules and Saturnian types of structures, but through this need to actually be more discerning and to squeeze out all the excess, so that way we only have what we truly need and we don't have all this frivolous AI chaos going on. And so that's going to be a big part of it collectively. Individually, it's a similar thing, but it's not necessarily about technology and AI and communication, although communication can be a part of it. It's more about, we just went through this period of upheaval and change and disruption, and so many different things happened in the Gemini area of our lives that Saturn's coming in and saying, okay, what changes do we need to solidify and carry with us moving forward for the next, well, with Uranus, it's 82 years, right? We're probably not going to live that long. But with Saturn, it's for the next, 28 to 30 years. What do we want to carry with us and what is excess? What do we not need? And how do we create structure around this change so we can get back into a state of equilibrium and balance so we're not just all over the place? Because Uranus in Gemini is going to feel pretty scattered on an individual level. Collectively too, I think we're just going to be like information overload, like this is freaking chaos. On our individual experience, it's going to be very similar, where that part of our lives, it's so freeing and liberating and exciting, and there's just so much new information and new ideas and new things going on. But at the end of it, we're going to be a little burnt out by that. I think Saturn is going to be a little bit of a blessing there. So, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, because the way that it really shows up collectively and individually is going to be a result of all of the different changes and exactly where that all branches off into over the next 8 years. So yeah, that's what's going on for the general energy of Uranus in Gemini. All right, so here it is, the moment you've all been patiently waiting for. Your forecast for Uranus and Gemini through all 12 signs, beginning, of course, with Aries and Aries rising. As always, make sure you listen to your rising sign, your sun sign, and your moon sign to get a more holistic overview of the energy of the next 8 years ahead. Yes, you're not going to want to skip all 3 signs here. Your rising sign will be the most predominant energy. Your sun sign will be secondary. And your moon sign is important to listen to as well, although this energy will be more internalized and subjective. And so let's dive in. So for Aries and Aries rising, Uranus is transiting your 3rd house, which is the house that is most closely associated with education, knowledge. It is a house that has to do with your day-to-day communications and your day-to-day commute. Things in that area are going to become more hectic. Your brain is going to be on overload because you're going to be overloaded with external information that's coming at you from all sides. This is a time where you're going to want to be learning and exploring new ideas, new concepts. You're probably going to be taking a lot of online courses, reading a lot of books, and just learning about things and thinking about things that are way outside of the box for you. This is also a shock and awe disruptive energy, and this can be very disruptive to your community and your connection with your community in both a positive and a negative way. Your interactions with your neighbors are about to get weird. Your interactions in line at the grocery store are about to get way more interesting. You're not going to be interested in like normal niceties and mundane communication. You're going to want to get into some very outside of the box things, some very revolutionary ideas, and you're going to collect people that are going to be on board for that. This is also a disruptive energy to vehicles and to travel and commutes. And so your day-to-day commute can get a little weird. There could be unexpected hurdles or unexpected issues involving vehicles. There could be unexpected messages and phone calls and things that come in that shake and rattle your entire reality and cause you to have to change on a dime. And that might happen from time to time over the next 8 years. This is also the house that has to do with siblings. And so if you are somebody who has siblings, your relationship with your sibling is going to change very dramatically, or your sibling is going to change very dramatically. Oftentimes we think about the chart all being us, and in modern Western astrology, that is the way that it's viewed. But in traditional astrology, the 3rd house is not you, it's other things in relationship to you, and it's people in relationship to you. And so this is a time where your relationship with extended family, and especially your siblings, could change in a very dramatic way, but also those people could be going through really dramatic changes. They could be going through big career changes, big life changes. The way that they were and the way that you viewed them at the beginning is going to be very different than the way that they are at the end of this transit. This is also going to create positive change in all relationships for you, especially if you are an Aries rising, because this will be in trine with your descendant. And so this brings in new and exciting relationships and really exciting communication and little trips and travels in your current relationship, if that's applicable to you. It also will bring positive changes within the relationship, so you do need to grow and change and explore very new outside of the box things together. For Taurus and for Taurus rising, Uranus is transiting your second house, which is the house of money and material possessions. That is what it is first and foremost. Uranus is going to be shaking things up. You're definitely going to need to approach your finances very differently over the next 8 years in a way that is going to be a little uncomfortable for you. It's going to be very different than what you're used to. This is a really great time to maybe invest in things that are innovative, that are technological, that are different, that are more advanced. This is a really great time to look into technology that can help you manage your budget, manage your resources, allocate your savings, technology involving investments and things like that as well. This is a time where you're going to crave greater financial freedom, and you're going to look to anything and everything that's going to help you to achieve that. And that's going to be very powerful for you, especially over the first few years, because this is going to be in trine with Pluto until 2028 in your 10th house of career. This is where you're going to liberate yourself from anything that feels stuck or stagnant or oppressive when it comes to your career, when it comes to your finances. This is where you're going to align what you're doing out in the world with what you truly need, want, and desire at a core level. And that's going to give you the freedom to create resources in really new and innovative ways. And you're going to have to think about doing that in new and innovative ways as well. So definitely look at different ways of thinking about your money, ideas and frameworks around finances and investments and possessions that are very outside of the box and outside of your comfort zone. That's going to be your best bet for achieving your goals. For Gemini and for Gemini rising, this is happening in your sign. Your entire world is changing, Gemini. Your entire life is changing. Who you are as a human, as an individual, that is changing as well. The way that you show up in the world today is going to be so different from the way that you show up in the world in 2033 that you won't even recognize yourself. In fact, your appearance might be different as well, because you're going to go through many style changes, many makeovers over the next few years. Radical changes in style is definitely an occurrence for Uranus and Gemini. You're going to be socializing in new ways and probably really embracing new technologies and communications, new social technologies. You're going to be wanting to rebel against who you were and the way that you've always been up until now. So you're going to want to engage with the world differently. Your major life themes, your path is going to change. This is going to reverberate into making major changes potentially in your relationships and also in your career, if that's applicable to you. You might move, change home life, or change your home environment or living situation more than once during this time. But really, this is all about you liberating yourself from anything and everything that is holding you back from kind of getting weird with it, right? Doing things that are outside of the box, outside of the norm, outside of the status quo. You're going to feel rebellious just for the sake of being rebellious a lot of times during this transit. And what you're going to say, what you're going to do, it's going to shock people. And that is going to cause potential issues in relationships where people are going to be like, whoa, Gemini, like, you're usually this way. And even though I'm used to you kind of shifting between this way of being and another because you are a Gemini, this is not what I'm used to from you, right? And so people might not feel comfortable with that. And so you might find yourself very quickly ending certain connections and relationships with people and very abruptly beginning new ones. So that can be a part of this energy as well. Really, this is a time for you to embrace change because your life is going to pivot in more ways than one, more times than you'll probably be able to count over the next 8 years. Some big changes, some small ones, but really it's going to be a process of liberating you from anything and everything that's not connected to you and anything you've been holding back on because you're afraid of what other people might think, because you're just don't have like the context for it because it's so outside of your paradigm. You are going to start embracing those ideas and ideals, and you are going to kind of morph throughout this process. For Cancer and for Cancer rising, Uranus in Gemini is happening in your 12th house, which is the hidden house and the house of spirituality. This is a time where your dreams are going to get weird and probably a little prophetic, so make sure you're keeping track of that. This is also a time where you're going to want to be doing things and studying things, especially spiritual practices and different types of modalities that are really outside of the box and outside of the status quo, but you're going to be doing it behind closed doors, behind the scenes. I've seen this happen time and time again with Uranus in transiting the 12th house for anyone. You're always up to something strange or that other people perceive as strange. Maybe it's not strange. Maybe it's just strange to like the normies out there, but you're not doing it loud and out in the open. This is also where your inner world is going to be disrupted in some way, and your inner sense of peace, your ability to rest and recover. And so this could be showing up as disrupted sleep patterns, like your sleep schedule could get all over the place. If you were a morning person, all of a sudden you're a night owl. If you're somebody that slept really soundly, all of a sudden you're dealing with disrupted sleep, insomnia, sleepwalking, all sorts of strange things. And that's also where your dreams come into play, because they get really weird, they get really vivid. You get certain messages and downloads and inspiration through your dream world, but also through meditation, contemplation, spirituality. This is where you're breaking free from old internal paradigms and unconscious paradigms and moving into something new. There could also be, very literally, on the material end, disruptive experiences that occur that involve things like hospitals or rehabilitation centers or retreat centers, even places that you go to be out of the world and out of day-to-day reality. This also includes places like prisons and the prison system, which hopefully you're not dealing with, as an inmate, but I've seen things like that occur sometimes where you're dealing with maybe somebody who is in and out of the prison system. And so things to think about. It's going to always be in the context of your own life and your own experience, and not all of these things will be applicable to everyone, but I do want to cover the spectrum there. And then for Leo and for Leo rising, this energy of Uranus transiting through Gemini is happening in your 11th house, which is the house of friends, group associations, and people that you surround yourself with by choice. There are going to be radical changes in your social circle, and you're going to be looking for groups of people that think very much outside of the box. You're going to have some situations where friendships begin and end rather abruptly and rather unexpectedly, and the people that you connect with are going to be people that you never would have anticipated or even thought of connecting with prior to this time period. So connections with people that are strange for you. So if your social circle is already like very outside of the box, very strange, very eccentric as viewed from other people's perspective, then you're probably going to start hanging out with some normies. And if your social circle is more like grounded, you're going to have some people coming in that are a little less grounded. If you hang out with people that don't really question things and are kind of complacent with the status quo, you're going to start hanging out with some weirdos. So it's going to be good. But yeah, so I love this energy of Uranus through Gemini for Leo, because this is going to bring radical changes to all of your relationships, not just your friendships, not just your group associations, but also your one-to-one connections are going to change very positively, and you're going to be changing together within those connections. And the other thing I should mention is it's not just that your friendships will change. Literally, your friends will change. So you might have experiences where your friends are going through really radical and disruptive changes in their lives. And that is how this is reflected in your chart, because your whole chart isn't just you and your experience. The first house is you and your experience, little astrology lesson here. And the rest of the houses, the rest of the areas of your chart represent everything in respect to you and other people in respect to you. And so when it comes to your social circle, your friends that you're going to hang on to throughout this period of, social disruption, they're going to be going through some changes. They might go through major career changes. They might go through divorces. They might go through big moves. And so you're going to see that a lot of people in your social circle are going through major disruptions, and you're going to be part of that experience with them. The other thing that you can do with this energy that I really like is to connect with a group of like-minded people for, really wanting to support some sort of social change or social project, doing something that's outside the box or different, shaking things up in your community. This is really a good transit for activism if that's something that is appealing to you or applicable to you. And so I love that as well. This is also an energy where you can have unexpected benefactors. And if you are somebody who runs a business, your income from your business is going to be subject to change and disruption. And so you're going to want to plan and prepare for that and make sure you have a good savings in place to get through the unstable times. Not that it's all going to be bad. You can have wild fluctuations in a positive direction as well, but just know that it's going to be a little up and down. The other thing that you can do in that case is look to technological advancements to help you manage your resources for your business or incoming transactions and things like that. For Virgo and for Virgo rising, this Uranus transit is happening in your 10th house of career and public reputation. A lot of you are going to be feeling antsy to change your career path or change something about your business. And even if you're not working, the disruption or change can come in relationship to your connection with people in positions of power and authority, or in relationship to your reputation out in the world, or the impact you make on the world, or the legacy you leave behind after your working years. You might want to make some changes to what it is that you're putting out there into the world at large. Your ideas during this time are going to be very different. They're going to be viewed as eccentric. You might be working on projects or even working for companies that are viewed as ahead of their time, that people don't quite understand all of the way. This is a really important time to explore multiple options when it comes to your career path, because what you change into the first time is not going to be what you change into the last time. You're going to be probably switching career paths, switching jobs, playing with a lot of different ideas throughout this entire period. This is also, even if you stick to your chosen field because you love it and that's what you're going to do for your whole life and you're so passionate about it, you're still going to want more freedom in your work. You're going to want to create systems and situations where you feel liberated, where you feel like you can do what you want to do in the way that you want to do it. You're going to want to explore and expand and do things that are outside of the box that other people might not quite get. And you're going to want the flexibility to be able to do that. So don't stick to any plan too rigidly because you're not going to be able to, or don't try, I should say, because you're not going to be able to. If you're looking for a new job, like this is the time. And even if you're not, if you think that you're happy with your work as it is right now, wait a few months into this, like you're going to start feeling this sense of this crunchiness, this agitation. And if you don't act on that and make some adjustments to your career, to your work, then the change is going to come from the outside, and it's going to show up in the way of getting fired or laid off, or big changes sweeping through the company that you work for that are going to force you to have to shake things up in one way or another. And then for Libra and for Libra rising, this Uranus transit through the sign of Gemini is happening in your 9th house, which is the house of travel. It's the house of connection to foreign countries and foreign entities. I could see a lot of unexpected, exciting travel plans, but also disruption to your ability to travel or disruption to your travel plans that could come up. You could see, unexpected things like your passport is revoked, or, there's for some reason your flight is changed and you can't go on that big trip, or other things where all of a sudden you get this unexpected wild invitation to go somewhere that you've never thought about or even dreamed about going, and you take it and you run with it and you go there. This could also be very disruptive to your paradigm. This is the paradigm busting transit. Your worldview, the way that you think the world works, that is going to absolutely be shattered over the next 8 years. So the 9th house is the house of your beliefs about God, the universe, the world around you. It's your philosophical and religious value systems. Those are going to be up for massive sweeping change, and other people aren't going to get it. So what you are onto, what you are understanding what you are learning. Other people are going to view it as eccentric or weird or strange or even ahead of its time. But it's important for you to break out of your old mental rut and your old way of viewing the world, your old perspective on things. And if you are somebody who's very religious, your religious values or your connection to that religion or your belief in that religion, your faith is going to be tested and shaken a little bit. And what you think is correct now, you're not going to think the same way later. This is also a time where if you are in a higher educational system, that can be disrupted. So you might begin and end study types of or educational types of pursuits rather abruptly. This is also a time where you can write or teach or share information that is very new and innovative and outside of the box. And especially if you're somebody who's involved in technology, you might teach what you know to other people, especially if it's something that's very innovative and ahead of its time. This is also going to bring positive change to you personally and to your relationships. And so because your worldview is changing, you are changing and you are liberating yourself through these new concepts and ideas. For Scorpio and for Scorpio rising, Uranus is transiting your 8th house, which is the house of debt and other people's money. So we'll start there. This is a house where any money that comes from an outside source is going to be disrupted in some way, or you might unexpectedly have money coming in from an outside source all of a sudden out of nowhere through an inheritance, through insurance payouts. I've seen that plenty of times, through unexpected tax refunds, because the 8th house is taxes. Your partner's income, if you are somebody who's in a long-term partnership, is going to go through fluctuations at this time. This is also the house of death. And it's not necessarily that people are going to die or anything, scary like that with Uranus transiting through your 8th house. However, your experience with that is going to change in some way. I've seen sometimes with a transit like this, unexpected situations that come up that are shocking and out of the blue that aren't necessarily related to someone or something dying. However, they do bring up this sense of your own mortality or cause you to view or experience that a little bit differently. And so that could be part of it too. This is also a really great time to study outside of the box occult sciences and kind of hidden knowledge that's very different and outside of the norm and outside of the status quo. This is also a really great time to look at utilizing technology when it comes to the way that you invest your money, earn your money, deal with your money. That's a big thing as well. And because this is the house of fear and psychological issues, this is an energy where a lot of your stuff is going to be brought up in the most weird and wild and unexpected ways for you to break out of it, for you to heal through it. This is going to be an examining of your psyche, where anything that is holding control over you because you're afraid or because you had some bad experience in the past, when it's not relevant in the present moment, that is something that you're going to have to come to terms with, and it's going to come about in ways that you didn't expect. You're going to have to face things that you didn't expect to face, that you didn't even know were there. And so this is a really great time to engage in some sort of therapy, especially if it's very innovative, new, outside of the box, very different, something that is not just standard like psychotherapy, something that is maybe more innovative in some way. If you're somebody who has debt, this is where, your debts could be unexpectedly called in to be repaid. So you definitely want to make sure that you're out of debt or that you're getting out of debt in some way. You might unexpectedly have to borrow money too. So if you're debt free, it's kind of like, oh crap, this came up, and then something happens. It could also be that unexpectedly your debts get forgiven, or somebody comes in and, gives you money for it. So again, there's like this energy of expect the unexpected when it comes to your financial situation, especially when other people are in the mix. For Sagittarius and Sagittarius rising, this Uranus transit is happening in your 7th house, which is the house of close one-to-one relationships, contracts, agreements, things of that nature. This is where all of that is going to be disrupted in some way over and over again over the next 8 years. That does not mean if you're in a healthy, good relationship that you're going to get divorced. That does not mean that you're going to be, doing something really wild there. But oftentimes what you'll see, if you're in a healthy relationship, the other person will go through dramatic changes over the next 8 years. And so an example from my personal life is I've gone through this transit over the last 8 years with Uranus and Taurus, and my husband and I made a big change together and moved to Colorado. So sometimes you'll change together with your partner. And then he quit his job and did a complete 180 career change, went back to school, and is now doing something that is so different from what he was doing before. It's completely unrelated. And so there have been a lot of changes that he's been having. And we had some changes that we went through together in our relationship, especially at the onset, because we made this big move and this big lifestyle change together. And so the way to navigate this type of transit is to change together, but also to expect that the other person is going to be going through a lot of changes, and to know that you have to support them through that. You yourself will be going through changes because this is going to be opposing your ascendant, sun, or moon. And so a lot about you and the way you show up in the world is also going to be wavering and changing throughout this period. But really, this is about how this is impacted by your connections with other people, or how the other people are impacting you and creating some sort of change in your life. This is also where contracts and agreements are going to be subject to beginning and ending rather abruptly. It's very hard to stick to a contract with Uranus transiting your 7th house. This is also where work-related connections and partnerships, especially if you have your midheaven in the sign of Virgo as a Sagittarius rising, they're going to be beginning and ending in rather shocking and abrupt ways. Sometimes that can be so positive because the right person will come in and it just changes everything. And sometimes that can be really difficult. If you're not in partnership, by the way, this is where your relationships can begin and end rather abruptly. There's going to be disruption in your romantic life where all of a sudden this person comes in and it's like, oh my gosh, this is great. It feels wild. It feels exciting. And then all of a sudden it ends. So it can be like on again, off again connections and romance, or it could be you connecting with someone who's very different from who you would normally date. And that would be a way to utilize this energy to get something to stick if that's something that you want in your life. And so that's what's going on for Sagittarius. For Capricorn and Capricorn rising, Uranus is transiting through your 6th house, which is the house of health, work, and daily routines. This is a time over the next 8 years where you are going to have no chance at all of sticking to any sort of schedule or routine. Your day-to-day life is going to be very disrupted. Your schedule is going to be all over the place. Your work might change. You might change career paths. You might change what you're doing on a day-to-day basis with your work on again and off again throughout this period. This could be disruptions to your health. And so if you are somebody who's generally very healthy, you could have unexpected things that come up that throw you off kilter or throw you off course. So that doesn't mean that you get some sort of like major illness or, something terrible like that, but it could be that like little things come up here and there that disrupt your, day-to-day schedule, your day-to-day life. It could also be disruptive energies from having to take on a caregiving role in some way unexpectedly here and there or at random intervals of time. There could also be disruptions involving pets and animals, or really big changes involving pets or animals, or even new pets and new animals coming into your life. I know we had a lot of that when my husband had Uranus and Taurus in the 6th house these last few years. And so all of those things are possibilities for Capricorn. For Aquarius and Aquarius rising, this is a liberating transit where you're going to be experiencing new ways of connecting with your joy. This is an energy of doing the things that you love to do because you love to do them, and you're going to find some really new, strange, outside of the box things that you love to do, some weird hobbies that other people don't necessarily understand. This is also a really great time if you're somebody who wants to start a business to become an entrepreneur, because the 5th house is the house of entrepreneurship. It's about taking a creative idea and doing something with it, right? And so you might want to take something that you love that's new and exciting to you and turn that into a business of some kind. This is also you really exploring different technology and things involving technology as a hobby or as an interest or as a means of entertainment. And so that could be part of this as well. Your romantic life could be a little all over the place. You might want more spontaneity and fun and excitement in romance over these next few years. And this could also be unexpected situations that occur with your children or in your children's lives. And so especially if you have adult children, but even if you have younger children, there could be changes that they are going through that are really all-encompassing, where the way that they were or the way that they were operating at the beginning of this transit in 2025 is very different from the life that they lead in 2033 because of the big dramatic changes that they've made. And so an example is if you have an adult child, they might go through a big career change. They might move across the country. They might, get a divorce. They might have children. They might, do something that really alters their life and in turn alters your connection with them. If you have a younger child, they could just be going through a lot of changes in their life, or as a family, you could be going through changes that impact them really dramatically, like making a big move. And so these types of things could show up during this time as well. And the final thing I will say for Aquarius is that this is the hallmark transit for unexpected pregnancy. And so this is an unplanned pregnancy energy for most Aquarius rising people. If that's not something you want, make sure you're doing your due diligence. If it is something that you want, it could show up in the most unexpected or outside of the box way. If you're trying to have a child, usually this means that you have to look to alternative ways of going about doing that. So maybe looking at utilizing technology, in vitro fertilization, things like that. Or you might be looking at alternative healing modalities in order to boost your reproductive system, those types of things. Any of that can be a possibility for Aquarius rising women. And then for Pisces and for Pisces rising, this disruptive Uranus transit is happening in your 4th house, which is the house of home, family, property, and real estate. Oftentimes, when Uranus transits your 4th house, there is a disruption in your family dynamic, or your parents go through major life-changing moments over the course of these next 8 years, and that reverberates into your relationship in some way. This could also be changes in your place of living. I've seen people with these 4th house transits of Uranus move many, many, many times over and over again over the course of that Uranus transit, where you think you finally landed in the place that you're going to be staying in, and then a couple years later, another opportunity shows up, and all of a sudden you're moving across the country again. That can be really common as well. You're going to feel potentially very stuck or very stagnant or very frustrated with your living situation if you're not changing something or moving. So I highly recommend, redecorating, renovating, doing some feng shui, whatever it is that you need to do to make your environment feel different if you're not able to move, or if moving is just not in the cards for you. It could be that you do a major renovation to your home and that changes the energy for you as well. Regardless of what's going on here, your home life is going to change, and that's going to reverberate out into your personal life, your relationships. And there could also be changes in your home environment that are caused by or that create a situation where you need to change something in your career. So for example, if you decide you want to move across the country, you're going to need to probably get a job somewhere else if you're not somebody who works remotely. Those types of things can really come up and change a lot of different areas of your life because the 4th house is an angular house, and so it reverberates into you personally and your own personal experience, the way that you show up. This could really bring changes in your relationships, especially relationships with family members, and this can bring career changes also, and they all tie into that foundation of your home environment, your living situation, and your connection with your family. All right, that is my forecast for all 12 signs. This one was a doozy, I know. You're definitely going to want to come back to it time and time again over the course of the next 8 years. So make sure you bookmark this one, save it somewhere good, and share it with your friends if you feel like they could benefit from the information I shared with you today. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and thank you so much. I will see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.